everybody, to the second edition of Whiskey and Wine. Today, we have the absolute pleasure of speaking with Nate Hoskin. He's actually the son of the very first woman that we interviewed, Karen, who was unbelievable. We said we had to get her son on. So yeah, Nate, we'd like to thank you for coming on with us and talking with us today.
Of course, guys. Cheers. I cannot expect to live up to what my mom did, but hopefully I can at least try.
She sets a high bar. And we want to definitely shout out Montagna, by the way. They're nice enough to sponsor this interview, the start of this series. I am drinking the Oro on the rocks. It's wonderful. Last week we had daiquiris with Karen. They were, I'm sure you're familiar with them, Nate. They were delicious.
Oh, much too familiar. I have some Exclusiva on the rocks, and it is phenomenal.
Yeah, it's.
I'm a little biased.
You are a little biased, but it's like objectively good rum. I'm not a huge rum
Absolutely.
guy, but this is great. So.
Why would you say you're not a huge rum guy?
I'm not gonna lie, but like I really enjoyed it. That like kind of highlights it even more how good it is.
Absolutely. If you can convert someone, then it's a really good product. That's the big thing.
Yeah, exactly. See, I'm
absolutely a whiskey guy normally.
Okay.
And I only discovered that after having tasted rum, because I tasted a couple of the more aged whiskeys and said, wow, this tastes like Montagna, because we age our rum in whiskey barrels. Uh-huh. And so that first nose, that first piece is 100% rum to me, even when I'm drinking whiskey.
Well, I won't tell your mom you said you're a whiskey guy. But...
Oh, she knows. We're fighting, but it's okay.
So I guess, Nate, let's just jump right into it. So the purpose of this interview series, as we've told our viewers before, our listeners, is to kind of dive in and see other companies that are acting sustainably and ethically. Our end goal is to be an ethical and sustainable athletic company. We want to create athletic clothing, and along the way, we're just trying to learn as much as we can, because we are kind of trying to shift our lifestyle while creating this company into that vein. And so we thought, what the hell?
We want our company to be a lifestyle company,
right?
Not just athletic clothes.
That's true.
But, a place where people can access different ways to live every part of it, or at least multiple parts of their lives sustainably.
Right. And so we thought, as we're learning from other people through interviews, through conversations, why not record it and share with everybody?
Absolutely.
Which is how we came across your mom, and she brought up your company. So to give a brief background, Nate recently graduated from, I'm blanking on the school out in California.
Chapman University.
Chapman University out in California, and started an asset management company.
Yep. So we're a registered investment advisor.
Okay. And you guys emphasize purpose-based investments, correct?
Exactly.
Okay. Now, how did that come to be? How did you decide, hey, you know what? The perfect time to start a company is during a pandemic. Let's just do it. How did you decide to do that?
So Hoskin Capital has always been at the end of my 5-year plan. I was working for an asset management firm, doing some investment management, specifically on the quantitative and analytics side. And in 2019, I actually moved to the investment advisory role. The reason for that being that I wanted to work with real people. I wanted to manage their stored energy and not just feel like I was working in the back office. And so I moved into an investment advisory role. And then I got laid off in April. Our entire company restructured, and I had been the most recent hire. And so I was the first one to go. And so April, dead center of the main crash, both in the stock market and in our economy, not to mention millions of people being infected. And I didn't know where I wanted to go. So I ended up shopping around. I looked at a couple of different wealth management firms. I looked at insurance companies, trying to fill that role of an investment advisor. But I kept running into this issue where none of them really aligned with my values. The main goal was manage money to make money. And while I think that's a great goal, and that should be a goal for anyone who is choosing to invest, it was missing something. And so for me, that was where impact and responsibility really came into play. And so for lack of any other real tangible options, I just started my own. I knew that it was going to be an entrepreneurial role wherever I went, because I had to go and build a book of business, whether I was working for a firm or working for myself. But with Hoskin Capital, I can control the purpose and the impact behind the work that I'm doing. And so that's why I really chose to make this a thing. And it's been really cool so far. I've been able to have some very cool conversations like this with people who totally share those dreams. Like,
We
they're
haven't
the ones
finished
who,
yet, Nate. Don't call it cool yet. We haven't finished yet. You don't know how great this is
that's
going
true.
to go.
You guys could ruin this. So we'll
Exactly.
see. I'll hold
we
you
could be
to that.
we could be the bad apple.
I will hold you to that. I look forward to you proving me wrong.
That's super cool though. And I think it's interesting. So you come from a finance background. I assume you studied finance at Chapman. Yep. I also come from a finance background. And while I was sort of exploring your company page and really seeing the impact-driven investments, I was thinking about the environment of business and finance that's often sort of cultivated in schools. And it's a money-driven one. You know, it's who can I get the biggest signing bonus from? Who is going to allow me to make 100K out of school? It's very money-driven, which is great in a lot of aspects, right? But when you think purpose, you don't often think profit. You know, a lot of times people think if you put purpose first, profit's going to fall second. So in that kind of like hyper money focused environment, how were you able to sort of like break that mindset and maybe it's not even breaking the mindset, but maybe it's just going a different way to get there and say, hey, I also want to put purpose just as high on my list of priorities as I do profit.
So at the end of the day, I'm a nerd. I had to figure out, based on the numbers, whether or not it was possible to hit both the monetary goal and the impact and responsibility goal. And historically, you really can't. Impact investing, or ESG investing, as it's mostly called in investments, have been sacrificing returns. You had to pick, do I want to invest responsibly or do I want to do incredibly well? And so for me as an investment manager, I get paid when I grow people's assets. And so for me to hit my financial goals and to hit their financial goals, I had to provide some sort of tangible return. But could I do that while being responsible? Or did every single client I work with have to sacrifice and collect some sort of smaller return? And so we broke it down. I probably did 1,000 hours of studying and research. And we actually have a white paper on our website about this, that it's tracking whether or not responsible investments are becoming more profitable for the people who hold them. And the answer is absolutely yes, 100%. And so that was something we can now really definitively say, is that you can invest responsibly and still get the returns you want. And so when I was considering your question, which is how can I hit the financial goals and still sort of have that money-driven attitude while adding impact, they're not mutually exclusive anymore. I've absolutely found that I can do both. And I think that Hoskin Capital is going to benefit from that, because now people are starting to realize that investing with a conscience is the most important piece.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think that, like, I mean, you see it across industries, right? You see, you know, Starbucks, you see all these major corporations taking a stand, whether it's for social justice, whether it's for the environment. And I think consumers are kind of starting to expect that. And I think it's been interesting to see that shift in the finance world. I think it was a little bit slower because, like you were saying, a lot of times you're sacrificing returns, which makes a lot of sense. But as it shifts, you know, I wonder if you're going to see a bunch more, maybe the big guys are to focus more like Hoskin does on those impact-driven investments, which I think makes a lot of sense. And I think another layer to that is the reasons. You know, I don't know if right now the reasons for doing it really matter. If people are focusing on the right things, whether they're doing it because they realize there's a way to make money, or they're doing it because they think it's the right thing. I think right now, as long as they're doing the right thing, it's a step in the right direction. I'm curious what your thoughts are on, I don't know, like, for lack of a better term, like greenwashing in the financial industry. Like selling this is like we're helping, when in reality they're just trying to make profits. Do you see that? Is that something that you try to work to not give off the impression that you're doing?
That is the perfect word, is greenwashing. And we saw it definitively in the fact that more mutual funds and ETFs, which are a couple of things that they're managed investment vehicles that you can invest in, they just changed their branding. They added ESG. The same way in 2000, companies were adding .com to the end of their name to become more popular. They're doing the same with ESG. But when you dig into what they're investing in, they miss the point entirely. I mean, one of my favorite breakdowns that I do, and this is actually one of the first things that we send clients, is our little brochure, is we just look at a couple of these funds and what they're holding. And some of their top holdings are tobacco companies and extremely polluting companies. And that's a big problem. I mean, I know that greenwashing exists specifically in sustainability, especially when it comes to selling clothing a lot.
Yep.
But it absolutely applies in finance as well, and it's becoming a bigger and bigger problem. So we work really hard to take those doubts out of our clients' minds, mostly just by being transparent.
Yeah, transparency is huge. And that's something that we are looking to do on our end as well. And like from a clothing perspective, I think that we've seen exactly that.
So I have a question. How does your company make an impact? How are you different from all the other companies out there who you thought didn't quite align with what you wanted to do?
So that's the biggest question, is how does something like investing carry an impact? Mm-hmm. And so the main thing that we do is we honestly invest in companies that are socially and environmentally responsible, and they're innovative. And so most people will ask the question, okay, well, you're just buying the stock of the company. How does this provide an impact? But by investing, you're actually supporting the price of the company's stock. And that stock price provides that company access to raising money because they can sell fewer stocks for more cash. And then they can adequately compensate their executives, which gives them way better access to good talent to really positively steward that company. And then they can also pass that on to their employees because a lot of them do stock ownership plans. And so what Hoskin Capital does is we build a community of investors who are our clients, and they invest only in responsible companies. And what we do is very cool, but it's very microscopic. We're actually part of a much larger movement that is moving the money in capital markets from not sustainable and irresponsible companies to the responsible ones. And so in a weird way, what we're doing is just failing to support those companies that aren't doing well, the same way someone would boycott a company's product, except we're doing it with their stock. And so that's the way we make an impact, is we actually just tell these companies, like, we don't want to do this and we're not going to support you. And then we can actually vote, because shareholders, unlike consumers, have an actual vote when you come up to like some sort of event, like they want to change leadership or they want to go in a different direction. We have a tangible vote when they make that decision, which is very cool as well.
That is cool. Yeah. And can you, I don't know if you're allowed, but can you give us an example of a responsible company that your clients are investing in?
Absolutely. So there are a couple that I like. It's always really, really hard to choose. Mm-hmm. One of them I'll share because I think they're innovative and incredibly impactful. And then I'll tell you about one that is more on the sustainability side. So when it comes to impact, I think one of the main leaders is a company called Crispr Therapeutics. Have you guys heard of Crispr?
I have not.
The name sounds familiar, but I couldn't tell what they do.
So Crispr is a company that has learned how to edit a genome. So Crispr, I'm completely forgetting what the acronym stands for, but they actually can go in and they can give your genetic code a mugshot of certain pathogens or of certain illnesses. The same way that they would do that and then learn to develop antibodies, your body can create an immune response. Crispr Therapeutics can program that immune response into your body. And it's allowing them to treat things like sickle cell anemia, which has previously been untreatable. And so that's the type of company that is acting incredibly responsibly to create an impact and actually push medicine forward and cure diseases that have never been cured before. So that's an example of an impactful company that our clients invest in. Then on sustainability, I think my favorites are probably First Solar and then Brookfield Renewable Partners. So First Solar is one of the leading solar companies, and they're expanding faster than any company. And I actually credit them with making solar power one of the most affordable sources of energy ever. And I don't know if you guys know this, because I actually just learned this while I was doing research for this company, but solar and wind energy are now the two cheapest available sources of energy in the United States.
Really?
Wow.
Which I was absolutely boggled by. I thought that was so cool. And so First Solar is now producing one of the cheapest and also the most subsidized sources of energy, and it has next to zero pollution. And so that's a good example of one of the ones that we invest in.
Do they just operate in the States or are they internationally?
I believe First Solar is just in the States.
Okay. Interesting. I think I just saw, what was it, in England or something, someplace in Great Britain, I think that renewable energy for the first time passed non-renewable energy in overall use across the country. And I was just
Overall
curious.
use, that's cool.
And
So more than 50%?
Don't quote me on that. That was my interpretation. But I think it was an Instagram picture that
Probably not England. Probably like
I very well could have misread it, or
Iceland or like something like that.
yeah, I'm not liable
That's
for
fine.
anything that I say.
The fact that that's a headline is incredible
Right.
regardless.
Right.
Mhm.
It's definitely, it's cool to see that the information, like you just said, that these sources of energy are actually cheaper, more affordable,
Mhm.
is I don't think known enough. And your mom actually brought up that that Montana is wind powered, I guess is the right term, right? Yeah. Okay. And that she was talking about the lifetime cost of ownership, and that is actually cheaper in the long run, even though there might be a capital investment up front. And I think that what you just said sort of goes in line with that. People have this perception that these renewable sources are just so expensive or inconvenient, or the capital investment's too much. But the more you talk to people, the more you're able to see these things actually are becoming more and more affordable, and apparently have passed those more traditional bad for the environment sources. And I think that information getting out there, I think, is the next step in people being like, okay, this might actually make sense.
Absolutely. Well, now it's a matter of telling the people and making sure that they understand it as much as the people behind the scenes do. And I think that's totally happening. And you can thank social media as well as news sources for that. But I feel like the message is spreading, which is great. It only makes people more excited in doing that. And then reading headlines like the fact that Biden just signed a slew of executive orders around climate change, and understanding that renewability and sustainability are priorities at the highest level of government, it has a trickle down effect, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the national attention being on this, I think, is huge. And I think having somebody like Musk also, I think, at the forefront, whether like him or hate him, I think that for sustainability purposes, he's moving in the right direction. I think a lot of people are sort of falling in line, which is big. And I've seen a transition just in the past 2 years with followers of Musk and Tesla. But anyway, I wanted to take a step back here, Nate, and jump into your background a little bit specifically. So obviously we spoke with your mom and Montana. We learned all about it. Did you have a lot of experience with Montana? Is that sort of why you have this ethical and sustainable mindset? Was it your parents that shaped you? Was it a different experience you might have had? Why do you sort of think in this vein when others might not?
It's absolutely my parents. I have them to thank for all of my activism streak. I mean, I was raised with a company that it was acting responsibly, and I got a good idea of what that looks like. But then it really took off when my dad actually started Ganesha Cook Stoves. Did my mom talk about them at all?
She did not, actually.
So Ganesha Cook Stoves is my dad's newest startup because they can't seem to stop. And the company actually builds small, hyper efficient wood burning stoves for people in need in Nepal and India.
That's so cool.
And so this was something that I got to play a very serious role in. And in 2016, we actually got to travel to Nepal and bring 30 of these stoves to a village that had been absolutely destroyed by the 2015 earthquake.
That must have been
give
awesome.
it to them and use it as both products testing and a very impactful thing to do. And it was the coolest research I've ever done. I mean, not to mention the fact that we got to go do a 10-day trek in the Himalayas to get to and from this village. But it was a very cool experience. And it was at that moment that I knew that whatever role I was going to play in this world, no matter how big or small, it had to be impactful.
God damn it. The Hoskin family is like single-handedly changing the world. What are we doing?
You guys cannot be stopped.
Yeah, what the hell are we doing?
You're in good company. That's what you're doing.
Every story I hear is like, oh, but did you hear about this fourth company that my mom started? No, I didn't.
Do you have any other siblings? Yeah. Are they starting things?
Are they saving the polar bears or something?
My brother will be on it, I'm sure. He's a little younger than I am, but he'll be next. Absolutely.
He has big shoes to fill. But yeah, so did you grow up working at the distillery?
Yeah. So I was working in the kitchen as a I think we were allowed to work at 14. It was whatever the legal age that you could be put to work was. I was there on my birthday, not actually on my birthday, but I loved it. I have always, I mean, it might explain why I'm a finance guy, but I have always loved finding ways to make money, not necessarily for the sake of making money, but just because it was so cool to figure out how to do it. And so my parents provided me an income stream, and I could use that to then go and buy whatever it was that I wanted, which of course at the time was like airsoft guns, things like that.
Naturally.
But loved it. Absolutely loved working for them, and did either part-time during the school year or full-time during the summer every year until I turned 18. And then I even came back for a summer in college.
That's a good gig.
Yeah.
Definitely a good gig.
So it's a good plan B too. If all of this falls apart, I can go work at Montagna.
Yeah, go hang out, drink, ski a little bit.
Could be worse. Could be worse.
So did you, besides Montagna, is that whole area very environmentally focused, the Crested Butte area?
I think so. That's a good question. In school, I was taught a lot about climate change, etc., as a fact, which speaks to my bias, and that might show up in our conversation. Absolutely, is that I certainly come from a community that believes that climate change is real and that these are issues that seriously need to be approached.
Right.
And so for me, it wasn't necessarily that everyone was oriented that way. It was just that it was the default. It was the understanding. And that was the basis upon which all of our decisions were made. And so, for instance, Crested Butte originally was a mining town. And so they had a pall of coal smoke over the valley the entire time. And the way the Crested Butte Valley is set up is that we actually get fall winds over one of the peaks and into the valley. And so people would have to wait almost a full year for that wind to blow the pall of smoke out of the valley and increase their air quality.
Interesting.
And then they would fill it back up with smoke the next year. And so there is now a zero pollution, I don't think it's actually zero pollution, but a minute pollution ban across the entire Gunnison Valley, where we're no longer allowed to put wood burning stoves in houses, things like that, unless they meet certain emission standards.
Do you have to drive like an electric car?
You don't have to. We can drive normal cars, absolutely. But when it comes to the infrastructure, especially the new infrastructure going in, it all has to meet a very high standard. There's an example with my parents' new house. They recently moved into one of the deed restricted sections in Crested Butte downtown, and their entire house had to be built to emissions code, which is really cool. So they have solar panels on their house, they have a big battery, you name it, they have it all.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. We read an article. This is gonna sound creepy, but like we were researching before your mom's interview, we read an article, I forget what site it was on, about exactly that. And it was fascinating to me. And like the way of the future, like in my eyes, it's clear that that's how houses are going to be built in the future because of things like solar panels becoming more accessible, more affordable.
And just people knowing about it more, and like you were saying, knowing that it's actually quite affordable, and it's easy to do this kind of stuff.
Right. I think that it's a combination of two things right now, that people that sort of aren't as sustainable as possible. Growing up, my family was not as sustainable as we should have been, for sure.
Funny story. When I went over, we started dating in high school.
Oh God.
And one of the first times I went over to his house, we, I don't know, I had like a plastic water bottle or something, and I was going to throw it away, and they had the double trash can thing. So I was like, oh, well, which one is the recycling bin and which one's the trash? So I can throw it in the right one. He goes, oh, we don't recycle.
So yeah, like I said, what? Not as sustainable since then, which was 2014, maybe. We have since started recycling. So
I just thought that was
kudos to us. Just kidding. But no, I think that one thing that probably in our area is, it's not that people don't believe in climate change. It's almost that it seems inaccessible. It's like
inconvenient.
If it's not impacting you directly, it's like, oh well, whatever. And I think that while it still might be that way, where people might sort of be of the mindset of, oh, it's not really hurting me, so why would I, walk an extra 10 steps, throw it in the recycling when I can just toss it in the trash? That still might exist, but I think a step in the right direction and a start of that shift in mindset will be the accessibility, the affordability of things like solar panels.
Mhm.
People like your parents, people like those in Crested Butte, once that mindset starts to spread, I think it'll spread quickly. It's not, I think
Yes.
there's the majority of people aren't climate change deniers. I just think that it's inconvenient, which sounds terrible to say, where it's like you're prioritizing convenience over the well-being of pretty much everyone around you. But I think it's the reality.
But
And
it's true. I think even in our neighborhoods growing up, like we have a trash service that comes every week to take our trash, and we used to have these recycling bins that were just like little square baskets.
2 by 3 feet.
Yeah, and then that's kind of all, if it wouldn't fit in the recycling bin, then we just throw it in the trash. But now that, in at least in our area, the recycling bins are just as big as the trash bin. And so it's like even that people are doing it more, and it's kind of like frustrating that it takes convenience and somebody literally placing something in front of you to use it. But whatever it is, I mean, I think it's good that people are actually doing that. And I think it helps them realize too, like, oh yeah, I could have been doing all these things and it's really not that difficult.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that is where money starts to play a part. And I mean, we talked about it. It's a very good, very like it is numbers. It's easy to count the effect that something has on your life in dollars.
Yeah.
So if you can offer an alternative that is cheaper and you can prove that positive impact, people love it. They love to go do that. And going back to Elon Musk, how do you sell a $70,000 car for 120 grand? You let the government rebate all of those taxes in support of all of these incredible sustainable things that Tesla is doing. And so I think that is where we're going to start to see a lot of improvement, is making up that difference to create demand for all of these sustainable things before they're technically affordable enough for people to make that change. And I think that's really cool. I think that's what we're starting to see. And I love the example with the different sized recycling bins. Sometimes you just have to play psychology. You have to provide people with the opportunity to do something responsible, and they'll do it inadvertently. And they weren't doing it not because they're bad people, not because they're denying the impact, but just because it doesn't affect them.
Right. No, I think that this administration too will be, like you were saying, I think a good step towards those incentives, those rebates, those tax breaks, things like that. But like along those lines, I noticed one of the Instagram pictures you all posted was talking about how you get, what was it, $2,500 for buying an electric motorcycle.
Mm-hmm.
That's a fact that as I was reading, I was like, oh shit, I had no idea that was a thing. But fascinating information, definitely useful if somebody's looking to get a bike. But the fact that I didn't know it kind of proves that, like, as of right now, there's a huge information block, I think, to the general population. In your experiences, sort of pitching yourself to potential investors, to potential clients, how do you convey as much information that's possible about the benefits of maybe investing in purpose-driven companies if they're not seeing it every day? Like, how do you convince them, like, hey, here are things that are out there that you don't know about, and sort of get on their radar in that sense?
I think it's actually the lack of knowledge around sustainable investing and around sustainability in general works in my favor, because it means that I get to tell people something new, and that makes me feel good, and they learn something new. And so when I'm in that situation, I mean, in terms of Hoskin Capital, we do all of our financial planning for free. And so if someone has a question like, hey, I'm considering buying a car, what's the deal with electric vehicles right now? What can I get? We can list out all of those different rebates. And that, just as kind of a side effect, makes them understand the benefits of investing sustainably. Because then they understand, oh, there are some big players behind this. If the government is subsidizing this, if companies like Tesla or NextEra Energy, companies like that are spending billions of dollars to implement this type of infrastructure, maybe this is a good idea. And not only should I be participating in it from a retail side, I should probably be investing in these companies too. And so it works as a double benefit, because they save money on taxes, and then they're like, I got an extra couple grand. I got an extra $2,500. I'm going to go buy a sustainable company stock. and use that to then grow my wealth. So it kind of sells itself sometimes.
Yeah, that's actually interesting that you mentioned sort of putting it on their radar is a positive. And for some reason in my head, I was thinking if they don't know it, is that going to be a negative thing? But it makes a ton of sense that if you provide them this information and then, like you said, you have this extra money, you're going to invest it, and then it kind of snowballs. Those companies start to grow. You have more faith in those companies. You invest more in those companies.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know.
That's what they should put on Reddit. Or whatever is going around right now.
Oh yeah.
Have you guys been following Wall Street Bets?
What are your thoughts on Wall Street Bets? Just turn the world upside down.
So I love it. It's just a fantastic psychological social experiment.
Oh yeah.
And I'm a huge fan of it for that reason. Can the little guys, the people with 20 grand in their accounts or even less, overthrow a hedge fund and make something happen in capital markets? Apparently.
Yeah, really.
I cannot speak to the long-term benefits of any of this. I think that the SEC will implement new rules. I think GameStop will go back down. We saw this with Hertz when they went out of business. Right. I think that as a microcosm, GameStop is just kind of a fluke. It's a cool idea. The fact that Reddit can blow up a stock is interesting. But the thing that I have found that is the most incredible about that whole idea is that we can make an impact as small humans.
Yeah.
And I think that is actually something that I have never even tried to convey to possible clients, because it's not necessarily that they don't know that sustainable investing is a good thing. It's just like with recycling. They're like, sure, I can throw my can away in the recycling versus the trash, but what's my impact? Right. What am I changing? What effect am I having? And GameStop proved that when enough people do something, incredibly drastic things can happen. And so for me, that's the thing that I really pulled from this entire debacle, is that it's going to show people in our generation that they have the power to do something like that as long as they work together, which I'm a huge fan of.
Yeah. Yeah. Seeing the retail investors take on the big guys is nuts.
Just keep swimming. I don't know if you're finding me.
Yeah. Exactly. The tuna when they're caught in the net.
Yeah.
Yep.
There it is. Disney.
I love it. Solid movie.
Along those lines. So I think a lot of those people that are driving this change are young people that are on Reddit that have Robinhood and whatnot. But those young people, as if we're old, as a 22-year-old. But
I don't know. I feel old sometimes.
But no, so those younger people, the reason I bring this up is because of your article on your site about TikTok investing. Mm-hmm. So clearly this younger generation is sort of getting access to the markets when the older generation might not have had the same access. And so have this inflow of, it might be smaller amounts, but it's more people getting involved in the markets at an earlier age. I think it's a ton of positive implications for their own financial futures. I think it's smart to get involved if you're getting involved in the right ways. And it's a great way to grow your wealth as a young person. From a purpose-based investing standpoint, do you see sort of this new inflow of young people into the market as a positive thing for companies that might be more sustainable, more ethical? Because generally speaking, these younger people are prioritizing other things along with profits, or do you see it not changing as much as maybe I might be thinking?
I think so. It's definitely there. Younger generations are much more concerned with their impact than older generations. Absolutely. I think it's going to require a second wave, though. So this actually goes back to what you were talking about, where people didn't necessarily know the benefits of impact investing or sustainable investing. Mm-hmm. Now people really understand the benefit of just investing. We got there. And so in my brain, that's a huge victory. I mean, I just had a great interview with a guy from Romania, and Romania has a very undeveloped stock market and not a lot of people know about it. And I was like, wow, most people that I talk to, if not all, either are very familiar with the stock market or actively invest somehow. Mm-hmm. And so for me, that's step number one. We got people interested in investing purely. And so now that second wave will be making sure that they understand the value of investing sustainably. And so I count this new influx as a huge good thing just because there are more people watching and there are more people aware of what's going on. And so now it's a matter of just pulling out the people who are really, really purpose-based, pulling them all together into a community and using that combined power to then affect positive change. And I think that's going to happen all over the world. It's not just Hoskin Capital doing that. That's very much a movement in my industry as well.
Yeah, those incremental steps are huge. And I think that like looking at it through that lens is important. And your mom was very similar in the way she was looking at the spirits industry with sort of women entering. She's, you know, it's an incremental process. It's not going to change overnight, but you have to count the little wins. And I think one of the little wins, like you said, it's a big win, is the amount of people getting involved is increasing. And then, like you said, ethical and sustainable is kind of the next step, but it's about those incremental steps in the right direction. But yeah, I think we don't have too many more questions for you, but I think one question we do want to ask everyone we interview is, as we've sort of gone through this process of we want to start an ethical and sustainable company, we've realized, well, there's 1,000 definitions for ethical and sustainable. You know, like how does Hoskin Capital sort of define ethics and sustainability in just the way you go about running the company and then the actual investments that you make? Do you have a criteria? Do you sort of just have like a gut check on different companies? How do you define that?
So we have a criteria. It is hours long, and it really tries to be thorough and methodical about how we approach companies specifically, because we need to consider their impact, their investment strength, their financials, et cetera. We run the gamut. But at the very end of the day, we judge sustainability and ethics on progress. And that's the biggest thing. Most companies operating right now are not sustainable, and very few of them are carbon neutral. And the ones that are might be buying carbon credits that aren't necessarily ethically sourced. There are a lot of problems. And so we can't raise the question with something like Google. Google is carbon neutral, but offsets certain things with carbon credits. We can't dig down to the granular pieces and say, you are not sustainable because you're still messing up this 1%. What we look at is the progress and the effort. Is this company working towards becoming the most sustainable company it can possibly be? And that's the biggest thing. And so I feel like when it applies to creating a new company, it's about being at the cutting edge of that. What are current companies doing that makes them sustainable? What are they shooting for? And then how can you be more sustainable and more ethical than what is currently available? Because there is no perfect. You're not going to be able to walk on the ground without crushing a single ant. There will always be problems, but it is that effort towards this idea of sustainability and ethical management that's actually going to make you the best available. And at the end of the day, that's the best we can hope for.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a great approach to it.
Yeah.
Especially when you're making decisions that are based on entire companies. I think it's hard to, you can't expect every company to be 100% perfect in every area that you want, especially when the word perfect is entirely subjective. So I think that the incrementality is huge. And I think that your guys' focus is definitely in the right place and in the right direction.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, it is for most humans, it is a process, and you can't just like wake up one day and live 100% sustainably. Like, what does that even mean? So I think I think what you're doing is good, and that you're accepting that people have to get there and they have to put in the effort, but it's okay if they're not, doing that one little thing.